Hi everyone, and this week we want to talk about another character from Fable and go a bit more in depth into the lore. And this is the hero known as Scythe that you come across predominantly in the Lost Chapters. What we want to find out is who is Scythe, what was he, what level of his power did he have, was he good or evil, and was he even a human? We think that he might be human, but he could be undead now. All we know about Scythe really is that he is really old, and he was a hero seemingly on our side in the fight against Jack of Blades. What we know is that he's possibly the oldest and the most powerful being in Albion. The rest, let's delve a bit further into.
Yep. So I guess I'll start us off then. He's sort of introduced as another legendary figure among the Heroes Guild. And it's sort of spoken about that he's very obsessed with cheating death, and as you sort of mentioned, I think we've already sort of confirmed that he has, but it's not set in stone that he has. But it's a very popular theory that he is undead. So we think Scythe is actually not necessarily immortal, but we think he has already managed to cheat death. He's the only one who is said to have seen and done more. He's walked the earth long before the guild was even created, and the Oracle of Snowspire is even unsure of what he's done, which sort of implies that he's, sort of long outlived the Oracle and pretty much everyone else. So there's nobody around to really talk about what he might have done. But yeah, he's basically immortal, I think. But we'll move on.
Yeah. So there's a common theory around that Scythe's true identity is that he's most likely by the name of William Black, who was the first Archon of the Old Kingdom, going back to the Archon's age. And you might know that phrase from playing the games and from Archon's armor and everything else. This is suggested in descriptions of the Archon vanishing while wearing golden mail and a blue robe, which is the same clothing that Scythe is dressed in at the time of Fable: The Lost Chapters. The theory is also supported in Fable: The Journey, in which Teresa details the story of William Black to Gabriel while travelling in Myrmor. After describing William Black's journey into the Void to cast off the corruption that afflicted him during his first voyage to the Void, she claims that William Black disappeared, never seen again in a form that would be recognisable to the denizens of the Old Kingdom.
So if somebody studies the history of Albion, the first time you hear the figure to be referred to as Scythe is after the fall of the Old Kingdom, during sort of an anarchy period known as the Fallow Wars. So this period of history mentions that Scythe served as a mentor of a bandit that eventually turned into a hero called Nostro, who is actually, you see his tomb, I believe, in Fable: The Lost Chapters.
You fight him while you can.
And you fight him as well, yeah. So that sort of just goes to show how old Scythe must be, even under this name. And he's obviously even older than that, because it's heavily implied that Scythe is not his actual name, obviously. So under Scythe's guidance, Nostro actually created the Heroes Guild in order to put an end to the violence that cursed Albion's people, and to unite the land under a single banner again. Scythe hoped that Nostro could bring Albion together for the first time since the days of the Olden Kingdom, which again heavily implies that he was around for the Olden Kingdom. So he's sort of trying to bring the old days back. And he watched his dreams eventually be dashed with the appearance of Magdalena, who is a power-hungry courtesan who became Nostro's wife, and through her influence, the Heroes Guild sort of degenerated into a house of greedy mercenaries. And Nostro's influence slowly got weaker, so Scythe's dream for the Hero Guild kind of failed. And eventually he refused to aid his former pupil. After bearing witness to his fall, he never forgave him and stood vigil at his side after he was poisoned by an assassin, staying with him until he died. So basically, Scythe's dream for the Heroes Guild was completely dashed, but he still stayed at the side of Nostro until he perished. And with Nostro's death, Scythe disappeared into obscurity once more.
Yeah, so in terms of appearances, if you are exploring the Heroes Guild during the child training stage right at the start of the game, he can make an appearance there if you kind of go into Maze's tower and into his room, you can overhear a bit of a conversation between him and Maze. He basically talks about going into the Northern Wastes. And then in the original Fable game, that was the last you ever heard of him. But in the Lost Chapters, he comes back on later on, where basically once you've defeated Jack of Blades the first time, you then get this message from Scythe that he needs help from the hero of Oakvale to keep evil at bay in those Northern Wastes. Just like fellow hero Briar Rose, Scythe's role is bigger in the Lost Chapters. As we mentioned, he did bring him to come up to the Frozen Lands. So the hero then goes to claim the Fire Heart, which means you can take the Ship of the Drowned across the icy waters to meet with Scythe, who then briefs you on the situation up in the north. Explains that he destroyed his guild seal, which is used to communicate and also transport yourself to different Cullis gates and stuff, so that he could ensure that the great evil could not reach the Heroes Guild, which meant that his communication had been limited with them. Basically, to plan his next move, they need to go and get the glyphs in order to reactivate the Oracle to find out more. So once the hero goes into the Necropolis, retrieves the glyphs, Scythe activates the Oracle and learns the resurgent evil is Jack of Blades again. With the revelation, Scythe advises the hero of Oakvale on how to confront Jack of Blades by opening the Bronze Gate, which can only be done by gathering souls of a certain criteria.
Yeah, so his final sort of impact on Fable the Lost Chapters is after the hero of Oakvale finally defeats Jack of Blades for the second time, Scythe is the one to contact them. But this time Scythe is urging the hero to destroy Jack of Blades' mask in order to finally banish Jack of Blades' soul. However, it is fully up to the hero whether the mask is destroyed and you get sort of the good ending, or whether the hero waits and then eventually puts on the mask and might sort of have their soul replaced with Jack of Blades'. It's not 100% certain what happens here. But either way, we don't know how Scythe reacts to that, as sort of the ending is, determined by player choice. So the last thing we hear from Scythe is that he wants the mask to be destroyed, which heavily implies that he's still good at heart. He's still sort of a hero character despite appearances and some potential theories that we might get into in a moment.
Yeah, it's very interesting. How, and we'll get into a bit more of that after maybe some trivia, but it's just very interesting that he would be so adamant to know that you need to destroy the mask. So what does he know? And there'll be more on that mask when we do a Jack of Blades lore video, but he obviously knows something about how the mask works and how Jack of Blades works to know that you have to destroy the mask. It also asks the question, who is Scythe? What is he? Is he just the oldest hero, or is it more than that? So we don't have a lot of information for someone so old. But there's some interesting trivia from particularly in the games. If you try and attack him, he just replies with, your attacks are too weak, no mortal weapons can harm me, and don't you have better things to do but attack me? Which is very, Fable-like, very interesting. He's basically, no matter what, he's one of the few named heroes in the whole game that can't be killed through either evil or good choices. He just doesn't die. Or in terms of, even in the story, you can't kill him in terms of the story. Maze obviously always dies no matter what. What's funny is that in TLC, when you must collect the soul of the oldest out of the three, which is for getting through the Bronze Gate, no one even mentions that Scythe is actually the oldest. No one even says that. And probably because they know that it's already basically futile to try and harm him because he can't, or maybe Lionhead never put it in. Because if he's bullying black, then that means that his soul has already been given to the Sword of Aeons, which we'll talk about in another video as well. But generally speaking, it's either an oversight, or if we try and work it into canon, then maybe it's because no one actually knows how old he is or what he is, or if he's even considered to be a hero at this point.
Yeah, and sort of following up on that as well, in Fable 2, it is stated that the people of Albion actually believe that Scythe is a necromancer. So he's sort of been vilified, despite the fact that it's sort of up for debate whether he's sort of a good or evil character. So he's actually just completely disappeared from Albion entirely. But this by no means he's dead. I think all the wikis say that he is not deceased. He is currently alive, so he is around during Fable 2, but he's, I guess, in hiding due to the fact that I think everybody believes that he's some sort of evil necromancer, despite the fact that it's definitely up for debate. He's also the only named practitioner of necromantic arts, as we stated near the beginning of the video. He's actually very, very obsessed with the idea of eternal life. That's one of the few sort of character traits that we have on him, and we definitely think that he has sort of already gained eternal life, because necromancy isn't really named in the game besides this, but it's very heavily sort of referenced in regards to Scythe. So it's I wouldn't necessarily say suspicious, but it's definitely like the majority of the mentions of necromancy and necromantic arts in the game are all in relation to Scythe, rather than in relation to just other characters or other spells. I think the only other time it's mentioned is talking about the Raise Dead spell, but besides that, it's not mentioned at all.
Yeah, and look, Scythe's appearance, appearing in some fan arts as well, with like a giant sickle, much like the Grim Reaper, being undead himself, especially if he ever has a hood on, has a very Grim Reaper like appearance. And I think there is potentially something to be said that he is potentially death itself, even, or has become so, maybe. And we don't know, but it would certainly be an interesting backstory, I think, to go into. But before we do, I mean, what was Scythe before this? There's been theories about he's the first Archon, he's William Black, and so it's been confirmed by Lionhead that he is the hooded figure that was mentioned in the letter from Rose, if you ever remember that. Which would add credibility to the idea that Scythe could be William Black, as Rose states in her letter that he says he knows our family, meaning that either as an Archon of the Old Kingdom, he is of the same bloodline and so an ancestor of Rose and the hero of Bowerstone, or referencing the fact that Scythe knew the hero of Oakvale, so it could be one or the other. But she also writes, I think he's a king or something, a reference to his reign as Archon. And also in the Lost Chapters, when the Oracle is recounting the story of the Archon, it says, but the first Archon still casts his shadow in this world. And if you take that literally, it kind of means that he is William Black, or it could be. So, I mean, I think this is a good theory, personally. I think that being William Black and then potentially, I guess, selling your soul or doing something in order to beat death. Maybe the only way to beat death is to become death, possibly. Hence the undead thing and the necromancy kind of obsession could be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I think to me it would make sense that he could be William Black, and maybe decided that he never wanted his reign to end.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's sort of. There's a lot of things that go to sort of prove this theory. The theory isn't just something that the fans have created. There's a lot of evidence that supports it, so it's not outright stated, but I think it's borderline canon that he is William Black. I think it's we're not going to outright say he is, but I think it's as close as you're going to get to a confirmed theory here. And I think it just makes a lot of sense to sort of view him in this light next time you play the game. You're sort of you're speaking to a character that's actually far what your character can kind of comprehend at this point in the game, and I just find it really, really funny how a lot of people talk about how old like the Guildmaster is, for example, or Nostro, but little do we know that Scythe is almost definitely substantially older than both of these two. So certainly one of my favorite characters in the series. I haven't got too much more to mention on him. He is mentioned in Fable 3, if that's what you were going to mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he is mentioned in Fable 3 several times through the weapon Scythe's Warhammer, and then there's also a Scythe tattoo set. The description of his Warhammer also states, it is foretold that one day Scythe will return to Albion. When he does, he might want his hammer back, just a heads up. Which I guess is sort of foreshadowing for a potential return of Scythe in a future game. I feel like it's more so just like a joke, I guess, but it is a little bit ominous, I suppose, knowing that what we know about Scythe and the fact that he is, I guess, immortal, and that he is sort of an aspect of death in a way. So while it's sort of a joke description, it's definitely a little bit disconcerting to know that Scythe will return. He's not in hiding forever. He will be coming back, and who knows what his impact will be in future stories. I think, not to get too far into the sort of conspiracy theory side of things, but I think if there is a Fable 4, which there's sort of rumors and inklings that there might be, I'm very much hopeful that Scythe will be a really, really important character in the main story of it.
Agreed. And a couple of last things just to re-emphasize. So Scythe is said to be the mightiest and oldest hero since William Black, but he's never been seen in a fight. And this might be because he's been up in Snowspire and everything, but he's basically never even been seen equipped with his Scythe, which is his weapon. Even through concept art and his doll, but in actual game you never see him with a weapon. And then just as a final thought, we've just done another video on Maze, but Maze seems to be an associate of Scythe. Like, they seem to both be associated with the Heroes Guild, and Maze has always talked about a strong desire to avoid death, but Maze never did it. So is this because Scythe never basically tried to teach him? Maybe he was suspicious of his motives and maybe refused to teach him. Scythe also mentions that his name is long since forgotten in the guild. And he's basically said that that's because of Maze. Like, Maze has potentially tried to wipe out the records of him, possibly. So just very intriguing stuff. Would like to know a lot more about Scythe, and I think his backstory would make for a definite great game setting.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think despite the fact that he's a relatively minor character in the games, there's so much, there's way more lore to him than there is to even some of the more important characters like Maze, as we said. It's actually kind of crazy how much sort of hidden details there are involving Scythe. And I think, as we said, I would really, really love to see a setting for a future game in Fable that has a strong involvement with Scythe. I hope they go back to a period where Scythe is sort of more prominent, or if they're going to continue the trend of sort of moving forward in time in Fable, I hope that maybe they move forward in time to a point where Scythe is coming back from his sort of time in hiding, and perhaps he'll have a much more bigger impact on the story.
Yeah, possibly as the villain.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, that's it on Scythe for now, guys. If you know anything that we don't, or you want to contribute, then let us know in the comments. And look out for our next lore videos. We're going through Fable lore at the moment, and we'll be going through other lores in the future. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.